Okay, we should be recording, and I guess I'm recording. Okay, this is Thursday, February 25th, 2016. This is cohort group of EDLS 702, and we're going to look just briefly tonight at two documents. First is a summary of some notes from the Odden text, chapters 8 and 10, and then we'll look at a PowerPoint on budgeting. If we have time, we may look at a document from the state just briefly on top 10 topics from the Public School Forum. These two cohorts are in a blended low residency group, meaning that they have classes on Saturday and Sunday, 3 weekends, and so in between those classes, once a month, we try to do Zoom topics that we can't get to during the normal weekend. So these are topics that we will cover tonight and tape this so that we can keep moving on other stuff on the weekend, which is coming up. So I'm going to try to pull up this document and still not lose you. Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Carla looks a lot more relaxed than me, I can say that.
Well, there are reasons for that, but we won't go into it, I guess. Going to go pull just a few notes up. We're going to talk about budgets. And of course, I've got a finance wizard with me tonight. Jeff Booker is superintendent at Gaston County and was deep into finance his whole career. This is not what I want yet. Let's go here. So let me see. I'm trying to get you up back with me here. And I've lost my document. Let's see. Carl, any ideas how I get you? I got you in the document last week.
Oh, I don't know. I think if you hit share screen, will it come up?
I don't see share screen.
Alt S.
Call who?
Alternate key S.
That didn't seem to do it. Okay, I'm hang on. I should have it down here somewhere.
Right in the middle of my screen shows share screen. But when I hit Alt S, it comes up and shows choices to pick your document.
Oh. Okay. I guess that's it. Y'all can see me and you can see my document, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're back in the ball game. Huh. For those of you watching later by video, I'm so sorry that you have to watch, but perhaps this is a great lesson in life. Not all of us are as techy as others. So show mercy and grace to those of us who are just learning. I need to be able to move through this. So how did I do that? Okay, here we go.
Over there on the side. There you go.
I want to talk about what a budget document is, first of all, and the Odden textbook does a decent job with this. Obviously, you know it's a document. It gives you an idea of the expenditures that are planned and the revenue that's anticipated, along with a typical description of the programs that it supports. The document itself will obviously reflect the philosophy of the school district. We all know where our priorities are, tends to be where our money goes. But an optimal document Auden talks about has 4 basic functions here. It's a policy document. It reflects the philosophy of the district relative to what is educationally important. It typically tries to assure equity across the schools in the district. So it's a policy document. It's also a plan. And we've talked last Zoom about the importance of planning and the use of data. So it is a plan that guides the work of the district. In creating a budget, you look at past expenditures typically and past revenues, and you try to project those same things for the coming year to build your budget. So it's a plan, it's a policy document. It's also, number 3, an operations guide for administrative decisions. It should be revered by your supervision employees, your directors and principals in terms of if the budget doesn't allow for something, then unless there's an amendment to the budget, those expenses don't take place. So it has a rather legal standing. So it's an operations guide for administrative decisions and a guideline for fiscal program and personnel accountability. People that are inexperienced, sometimes, especially at the classroom level and the school level, will just go out and buy things and have no notion of the fact that it needs to be in a budget. They also have no notion of obligating the funds through a requisition or purchase order either. So principals have a task, and they are driven often by your finance officer in terms of their level of understanding, but they have a task to make sure employees at every level are abiding by a budget in terms of being a plan and an operations guide. It's also a communication tool, and they are public documents. They are provided for inspection. And so they are a communication tool. When they're presented, they certainly show the priorities of the district. It's also used to share strengths and challenges of the instructional program with the community. And obviously the community has a lot of stake in how money is spent, because the tax dollar and the property tax, sales tax, et cetera, are the funding sources for that. So in its optimal form, a budget has those 4 functions. And then he talks about features of a good budget. And this is found in your text, chapter 8. Unity is the first function of a good feature of a good budget. Unity simply is a notion that you have clearly included all the programs and services in the budget. It's inclusive. There's nothing left out, so it unifies the entire total expenditure package for the district. Regularity is a common feature, simply meaning that you can count on it being done at certain times each year annually. Typically, fiscal years run July 1 to June 30. That's not always the case with every organization. For example, where I work part-time, Lenore Ryan, they have a fiscal year of June 1 to May 30, so it can vary. But across North Carolina, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I believe it's true in all 115 districts, July 1 to June 30 timeline. That's correct still, right?
Yes, sir.
So another common feature is clarity. Budgets are clear where the money is to be spent. We went over budget codes a little bit in our first weekend. If you don't have a line item for something, if it's not clear of where the money's coming from and where it should be spent, then you have a problem. So you're accounting for what you have as in terms of money to spend, known as revenue, and then you're clearly accounting for the money as it is spent. And I've mentioned here the chart of accounts again because it provides an exactness for reporting that the state is interested in, that all taxpayers would be interested in. So it's a rather specific, clear process. It's not sloppy when it's done well. And as we talked about, there are checks and balances in place. For example, the licensure salary audit that's done on a daily basis will capture any irregularity typically. So North Carolina, as far as I can tell, does a really good job in terms of trying to keep up with all that money is spent. Another feature of a good budget is that they need to be balanced, meaning simply that you don't spend more than you have. Sometimes systems get into allocating more of their fund balance, for example, than is healthy. But somewhere, somehow, if you're going to spend the money, you have to have it as a revenue. So new superintendents coming in will typically depend heavily on a good finance officer, and even experienced superintendents, if they're wise, will consider those people very, very much. So balance, the good budget has unity, meaning that it covers everything. You don't leave things out. You don't end up 3 months into the year thinking, oh my goodness, why didn't I budget for this? I should have known it was coming up. So it includes all the pieces. It's regular in terms of when the budget planning occurs and when the budget comes out and the time frame upon which the budget operates. It is clear, it must be balanced, and then it's a public document, and there has to be publicity. Citizens have a right to view, comment on the budget. And then another feature of a good budget, operational adequacy. Of course, adequacy is a term that we've talked about quite a bit in our first weekend. Expenditures detailed in the budget should be adequate to provide services that meet the district's goals and missions. Again, going back to this notion of good planning, you can't overstate the importance of planning and involving the right people so that your budget does do what it needs to do. We've talked all around this already. Budgets do require a thoughtful timeline with important dates as well as consideration of who will provide input. We've already talked quite a bit about the importance of getting the right people on the bus in terms of helping you as a leader, particularly the superintendent, who is the primary responsible party to produce that budget. It's important to get the right people advising the superintendent. And obviously the finance officers are a very important part of that. As we said, often you use a lot of pieces of data to inform the budget, enrollment data, capital issues in terms of conditions of buildings, economic conditions. If you're a wise leader, you keep a pulse on the news. You understand what the culture is doing. You anticipate, for example, population shifts. You anticipate even down to health issues, enrollment of preschool kids. A few years ago, there was lawsuits regarding required eye exam, for example, with entering preschoolers. And when you dug deep enough, you found out that some local eye doctors were very interested in that policy passing. So policy, new laws made in Raleigh have a lot of implications for budgets, and so wise superintendent keeps a pulse on all those things coming down, because the last thing you want to do is be surprised by an uninformed amount of money that's going to have to come out of the budget. Raleigh makes it tough in the name of efficiency, which is a wonderful concept, but I used to liken it to this. It's rather unwise for a person to brag about the fact that they owe no money, have no debt, when if you look at their total circumstance, they don't have anything either. So there's a balance that has to take place. It's one thing to brag about not having a high car payment, but if you drive a car that's it's not reliable and tends to break down and leave your family in straits, then I would think that braggadocio doesn't amount to much. And I think our state has fallen into that trap sometimes for the sake of saving money. We all know that sometimes money spent in due time is money well spent and saves you money in the long run. Anyway, a budget is extremely important, and you use all kinds of data that we've talked about to inform that budget. So anything you want to add to that, Carla or Jeff? And Adam, hello. I see you're here.
Dr. Edmond, if you look at the North Carolina School Board Association standard policy
Mm-hmm.
for budgeting, it kind of follows those 4 points. They're expanded into 8 or 9, but very similar.
That's the North Carolina what?
The School Board Association,
School Board,
they
okay.
provide those model policies.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll have to pull that up in class. Thank you.
You can pull ours. We pretty much use them straight up.
Okay. All right. Hit chapter 10 for just a few minutes. Some of the points that Auden and Pikus make here. Strategic budgeting should be practiced to reflect deep thought of priorities and needs. That sounds like common wisdom, but you'd be surprised how often, I think I said this in class, sometimes novice planners will say, let's add 2% to everything and keep rolling. That works fine if you can assume without doubt that your budget is perfect to start with, that you've provided for every need and it's not over expended in certain areas that no longer are important, and or areas that are important are not missing. But I've always had a little pet peeve with this notion that if we just stay with what we got and add X%, we'll be fine. I think that's a decent starting point, but I think the conversation has to go a lot deeper than that, and certainly reflect this deep thought that Pikus talks about here. He, and I think truthfully so, argues about the fact that class size is given far too much attention and it limits options for other needs. If you look through his chapters, he spends a great deal of time on talking about class size and ways to create more money for other needs. And we all have talked about the fact 85 to 90% of our budget tends to go to personnel costs. So obviously, if you have more teachers to drop class size, then you've spent a lot more of your money. So the word I use quite often, the word balance, comes into play, and you've got to balance those lofty goals of low class size with these other needs that you have. Strategic planning, he talks about aligns resources to programs. Obviously, when you have different educational programs, you have cheerleaders for those programs, you have people that hold them in high esteem, very dear to their hearts, et cetera, so forth, so on, especially at the classroom level. So a wise planner, a wise superintendent keeps those things in mind, involves those people when shifts are coming, but needs to understand that when you cut out programs, there's going to be some backlash, and preparation prior to that is important and pays you some huge dividends. We've looked a little bit at staffing formulas already, and we'll do a little bit more of that, but North Carolina uses staffing formulas in great detail to help with the funding that they give us. Auden and Pikus talk a lot about scheduling. The way I've said that here is that scheduling is the tail that wags the dog. He talks a lot about the 4-block schedule versus the traditional 6-block schedule or 7-period schedule in a lot of our high schools, and would argue that the 4-block is extremely expensive. If you think about it, most of you may have. Jeff, do y'all have four blocks too? So you're, you can argue it. You're running 4 courses each semester, so you're getting 8 courses versus 6 courses in the traditional year-long schedule. But Auden spends a lot of time talking about the 4-block, what he calls expensive, and I'm not sure he ever says it's inefficient. I don't think he could do that, but he does talk about the expensiveness because of the part of it, because of the 90-minute planning period. Any ideas on that? Either one of you, Carla, you're in a high school. Y'all 4-block or traditional?
We're a modified block.
Okay. Is that some of both then, like a 1 hour and a 2 hour? Yeah.
Yeah, the majority of our classes are block, and then we have some that
Y'all have either one of you have like 0 periods before and a 7-period after school kind of options for kids?
She's remediation.
Okay.
And we've got one school that went back to a 7-period today because it's International Baccalaureate. So this year it's doing it.
Okay.
Year long, but it makes it, with 11 high schools moving from in and out of that school makes it difficult on kids.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I've just hit the high spots of some of 10 for Auden and some of 8. So we'll try to leave this and get a PowerPoint up here. We'll do just a little more talking about budgets using this as a prompt for our discussion here. Okay, still got you, and I got a document up here, so that's good. I might make it tonight. This is a 4th edition set of slides that Dr. Urey sent me a year or so ago. We're in the 5th edition, but some of it can still guide a discussion here. So we talked already a little bit from the Auden text about what is a budget. It's a document that specifies expenditures and revenues, and there's a 3-pronged triangle here that shows that. Of course, the reason any budget exists, of course, is to finance or fund what's important to you. In this case, the programs of a school district. So there's the 3 legs of the stool.
Dr. Redmond, it's still showing your Word document. It's not showing the PowerPoint.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir.
Your screen sharing is paused. Resume share. Okay. Now I lost you.
We can see you.
Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Can you see my screen?
No, sir.
So what do you see me? You just see me trying to figure something out, right?
Yes, sir.
Screen. I don't even have options here to. Okay. I got you back. I've got my slides over here. Any ideas? I'll take you over. Can you see my screen yet? My slides?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Let's see. You can't see my screen then, right?
No, sir. We have your Word document up.
Which one do you have?
It says Dr. Redmond Zoom link.
Yeah. See, I wanted, I don't want that. I want, I want this. I want this. Can you see my
There you go.
slides?
You got it. School district budgeting's up.
Okay. You see the budget now? You still see me and hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know what I've done or not done, but we'll roll. Could you hear me talking about the triangle? Robert, get out of here. You hear my schnauzer?
Yes, sir.
Boy, I think my week's going like yours. Maybe not near as bad, but anyway. Let me get him out. We talked about the need for budgets, so we'll keep moving. Well, how would public budgets differ from private company budgets? Any thoughts on that?
Well, typically we don't generate revenues. We just are given funding.
Right. So when you're making widgets, you can increase or decrease your income typically, and you can also make decisions without a lot of input, except maybe a board of directors or somebody. We talked about what a budget tells us is a spending plan. Lets us know the revenue. Why do we care? Well, we want to stay out of jail, first of all, but we want to be responsible and good stewards of the public's trust, etc. We talked about this already. It's a policy document. It's a financial plan. We didn't talk about past, present, and future, but we do reflect on past budgets to get some idea of where priorities have been and how expenditures have gone. We look at the current budget, and of course we plan for the future budget. And it's important to keep all those three lenses open as we look at budgets. It's an operations guide. We talked about that in terms of being accountable for expenditures, accountable for the kind of programs we run, accountable for the people that we hire. One of the biggest public outcries you'll get is when you staff too heavy, or you hire certain people that seem to have been hired unfairly or with certain preference. So it is an accountability tool in many regards. Personnel and finance work closely together, as we've talked about. If you don't have the funds for a position, you don't hire a position, those kind of things. It's a communication tool. We've talked about that. It shows the public our priorities. It shows where we spent money. It's traceable. It's lasting. It's depended upon by lots of groups of people for lots of purposes in terms of either supporting certain issues or defending certain stances. We've talked through these 6 features of basic budgets. The chapter spends time talking about line item budgeting, program budgeting, and zero-based budgeting. Jeff, have you done much with zero-based?
People will say that, most folks just do a modified where they say justify your budget, because it's zero-based is you blow it up and start over.
Exactly. You start from ground zero, which is, it sounds possible, but it would be very rare that you would absolutely do that to the full extent.
Well, yeah, especially when we have so much dictated in its line item by how it has to be spent.
Exactly.
And when you've gone out and gotten grants, et cetera, they have such strings attached to them.
Mm-hmm. So novices sometimes will brag about the fact, well, I go for more of a philosophy of zero-based budgeting. We start from the ground up and move back up, because I don't want to be held hostage by anybody or have preconceived notions, but that's just not the case typically. As I said, my pet peeve is just applying a percentage across the board and you're done. But I did also say that your line item budget is a good starting point, and then you go from there to justify either keeping something or not keeping something. He talks a lot about this adequacy model in terms of what does it take to serve the students that you're serving? So obviously looks at different components like this, numbers of students by grade, the percent of your high needs groups, special ed kids or ESL type students, or poverty measures with free and reduced lunch counts. All those factor into the type of services that you'll budget for. And then he goes into ratios, teachers, and gives all kinds of formulas for his adequacy model. I'm not going to spend much time there. All school districts have a certain staffing ratio that they typically will use. If you don't have any notion or guide for that, you're shooting in the dark. So most people have evolved to some type of evidence to justify their funding over their positions. So we got the state cut out professional development money several years back. Are they putting any back in yet?
Not of any materiality.
Yeah. And they did the same thing with technology. I don't guess it's gotten any better either that I remember.
Nope.
So a lot of this, like instructional materials, there is an allotment for instructional materials still from the state, right?
Yes.
And then you go, typically you will farm that out to your school level. And back in the day when we got professional development money, we had to assure a percentage of that had to go to the school level, and a much smaller percent could be used for the district level. It seemed like it was 75% had to go to the schools and 25% could come back to the district. But like we said, that's gone away. Some of the types of ways to look in a budget document, these are some subsections that would be present. You usually have a budget message from the superintendent. It's a school district in terms of introduction. Financial summary information, expenditures, revenues, position counts, explanation of calculations. Then the budget guidelines here, I think are still typical. You have a superintendent's message, a calendar when it's developed, how people participate, the different forms that are used, how it's structured. And then these are some things that are used in terms of forecasting and preparing the budget. Enrollment forecasting is done by a variety of methods. We'll actually look at some of these Saturday with the Burke County model of what the Western Piedmont government did to forecast populations. There are some of the more common ways to do that. Now, obviously, it's important to be able to forecast how many children you're going to have over a period of time. Personnel needs are tied, of course, to the number of kids that you have coming in. Looking at your program needs, you have to estimate expenditures for those needs. And then we've talked a lot about the accounting format in terms of the 1213 number budget code 151-101-121-001, those long strings that we looked at in terms of object, function, and program. So we've gone through that. We talked a lot about the sources of income in terms of where they come from in terms of property tax for the local government. The state revenue depends heavily on state sales tax and income tax. The federal revenue primarily depends on income tax. There is a process for budget amendments each month. We'll look a little more at that in the weekend. And then the formal process of approvals by your Board of Education, county commissioners, etc. So Jeff and Carla both, Auden and Picus really advocate money down to the school level. And that's easier said than done in terms of school level people understanding the process, what it can be spent for, et cetera, so forth, so on. So are you trying to do more of that at the school level? Because there's so many district things that have to be done. How do you view that?
Well, like risk management, that's very hard to push that down.
Right.
And then we run a centralized kitchen for food services, and that's unique in itself. So,
oh yeah,
our cafeterias are businesses within the school, and so the principal doesn't really have responsibility for them. But as you said, so much of it is at the top part. It's more of what they can control. We push down, meaning
right.
your paper purchases, and I think a lot of the majority of districts in North Carolina have centralized copier purchases because
right.
you do it.
You can really spend a lot of unnecessary money if you don't consolidate those copier contracts. So I think you're right. I believe in giving as much flexibility as you can with principals, but it's a whole lot easier said than done in my experience.
69 money is the biggest one that
right.
schools get the most flexibility with.
Yeah. That's the at risk.
Yes, sir.
And then I guess some flexibility with Title I, depending on the.
Right, once they get their allocation.
Right.
But more and more districts are taking, to take off the top to support the program.
Yeah. Auden spends a lot of time with 3 or 4 different model districts. One is Seattle, another is Washington. Here in San Francisco, so I'm not going to go into that, but we'll stop with that. Okay, I'm going to end. Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have class this Saturday. We'll gather at 9. I appreciate both of you for participating. Adam, I never did hear your voice. I hope you're seeing us. Can you hear me? We'll try to run this down to YouTube and see if we can get it done and post the link. So thank you both for being here, and I'll see you Saturday. Any comments or questions?
See you then. Give Paul extra credit.
All right. Take care.
All right, thanks.